On our 10th wedding anniversary, I filed for divorce. Baldwin scoffed. You've put up with me for 10 years, and now you're throwing a tantrum? He thought I was angry that he'd brought that young girl to our marital bed, so he waved a hand and had the bed replaced. When I still insisted on the divorce, his eyes turned dark. Don't regret this, he warned. Everyone expected me to cry, make a scene, and change my mind on the way to the Civil Affairs Bureau. They thought I would continue my love-hate relationship with Baldwin, but no one knew that my first love, who had been in a coma for many years, had woken up. 1. On our 10th wedding anniversary, Baldwin, who was absent from our party, turned up in another woman's arms. Even though I had prepared myself mentally, I didn't expect him to bring someone into our bedroom, into our marital bed. Through the door, I heard the girl's rather resentful voice. You've been with her for 10 years, and you've only been with me for 10 days. I'm so jealous of her. Baldwin's voice was full of indulgence. Didn't I promise you I wouldn't go? Why weren't you satisfied just now? How about one more time? It wasn't until the sounds inside became muffled that I kicked the door open. The girl who had been on top quickly burrowed into the covers. Even through the covers, I could see her trembling. Baldwin looked up, his eyes still bloodshot. He didn't seem annoyed to see me. He patted the person below the covers through the blanket, as if to comfort them, then got out of bed, picked up the bathrobe on the floor, and put it on. His expression was casual. Why are you back so early? Aren't you satisfied with the gift? Or do you think the party wasn't grand enough? Seeing that I didn't speak, he sighed. Natalie, your appetite is getting bigger and bigger. I don't know how to satisfy you anymore. The satisfaction he was talking about here was completely different from the satisfaction he had just talked about with that girl. But I still felt a physical disgust. Baldwin laughed at my reaction. Is it a bit late to feel disgusted now? He handed me the water glass on the bedside table. Drink some to settle your stomach. Seeing that I didn't take it, he followed my gaze and saw the blurry lipstick mark on the wall of the cup. He apologized playfully. Sorry, I didn't see it. I couldn't stand it anymore and snatched the cup, pouring all the water on his face. Baldwin, we're getting a divorce. Hearing my words, Baldwin raised an eyebrow, and a gleam appeared in his eyes. Playing suicide, disappearing. You're tired of all those games. Now you're going to play divorce? This time you're playing so big, can you handle it? Baldwin was a very vicious person at heart. He always liked to watch me driven crazy by him. He would calmly watch me hurt myself with a knife, then stop because I was afraid of the pain. Then he would watch me stand on the rooftop and threaten to end my life. But because I was afraid of heights, I couldn't take a step. He would also stop all my cards when I disappeared without a trace, and wait for me to come back to him obediently. He would calmly wait for me to surrender, break down and cry, then gently embrace me in his arms. With a rather pleased expression, he would say, What are you making a fuss about? I'm yours and all the money is yours. What else are you not satisfied with? Baldwin had said a long time ago, just treat me like a dog. Occasionally, loosen the leash and let me go out for a walk. But no dog doesn't know where home is. I looked at him and remained firm. Yes, divorce. 2. Baldwin followed me to the Civil Affairs Bureau, tapping on the car window intermittently. I'm curious, what excuse will you come up with next? Car broke down? Out of gas? Or maybe you'll crazily cause a car accident. Seeing that I didn't speak, he took out his phone and called the maid at home. Tell Odessa to get out of here quickly and throw away the bed. Order a better one. Odessa is the girl who hid under the covers. She's 20 years old this year, just at the age of blooming youth. Coincidentally, I was also 20 when I met Baldwin. The difference is, Baldwin is very fond of Odessa, while he used to scold and humiliate me. After Baldwin finished the call, he didn't say anything else, but I knew he was deliberately letting me hear it. In his opinion, he had already made a concession, and now I needed to know when to stop. After 10 years of marriage, we naturally understand each other's little tricks. Only this time, I didn't follow his lead, but stepped on the gas pedal directly. When we arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau, Baldwin still had a playful smile on his face. When I was writing the information, my hands were shaking a little. Baldwin put his arm around my shoulder, and a chuckle escaped his throat. Are you going to pretend to be sick? Do you need me to help you later? Until I handed him the information with my name written on it. The playful expression on Baldwin's face cracked. His smile froze on his face. Natalie, are you sure you want to play this big? Don't expect me to coax you back like last time. The last time Baldwin was referring to was 10 years ago. I caught him flirting with other girls several times. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore, so I broke up and disappeared for 10 days. After Baldwin found me in a mess, he quickly married me. At that time, he held me very tightly. Natalie, I was wrong. I'll never do that again, don't leave me. Recalling the past, my body trembled more and more violently, but I still didn't say a word. Baldwin stared at me intently and slowly signed his name. Natalie, don't regret it. After the divorce certificate came out, I took it and turned to leave. Behind me, I heard the sound of Baldwin making a call. Sweet, ambiguous. Pack your things and move to my house from today. He made another call. Archer, don't change the bed. 3. The hospital called and said Zebulon was very agitated, so I hurried back. Zebulon had been in a coma for 13 years and had only been awake for a week. I had been with him the whole time, but this time he had been out for quite a while. When I rushed back to the hospital, I turned off my phone and told him that from today on, I would be with him wholeheartedly. Soon the doctor said he could be discharged. Zebulon was very happy. I told him I needed to go home first to pack some things. Wait for me to come back and pick you up, okay? I went back to Baldwin's house to get some things, but after trying several times, the password was wrong. I realized he had changed the lock. I took out my phone and called him. He answered with a nasty tone. Oh, finally ran out of money. You've lasted quite a long time this time. But I can't go back now. Odessa is too clingy, even more clingy than you. Why don't you come over? That kick you gave her last time scared her badly. She's probably afraid of you. She might just leave if you come. When I arrived at the private room, Baldwin was chatting with his friends, with a cigarette between his fingers. He rarely smoked, only when he was in a very good mood. I'm so looking forward to what new tricks Natalie will come up with this time. I'm tired of watching you hurt yourself and try to end your life. Baldwin tilted his head back, and the smoke shrouded his face, but it still couldn't hide the upturned corner of his mouth. Odessa was sitting beside him, peeling grapes for him. Mr. Baldwin, what's the difference between this and teasing a kitten? I kicked the door open again, looking at Baldwin. Come home with me. Baldwin glanced at Odessa beside him. Then you have to ask her. I stepped forward, grabbed Baldwin's collar, and dragged him out of the private room. There was a cheer from around. Even Baldwin chuckled. TSK playing forced love, huh? Honey, I'll definitely cooperate. When we got to the door, Baldwin stood behind me. The password is your birthday. How could you not guess that? For nothing, I love you so much. The door closed, and Baldwin pressed me against the door and kissed me. Honey, don't say it. I've missed you so much since you disappeared for so long. With that, his hand reached into my clothes. I pushed him away. A cheap perfume smell, go take a shower. Baldwin lingered on my lips for a while before turning and going into the bathroom, humming a tune in a good mood. After all, in his opinion, every time we reconciled, we would sleep together. But this time, after I packed my things, I turned off the power and went out. 4. I picked Zebulon up from the hospital and brought him home. He became very heavy all at once. I always thought you would sell the house for me. Zebulon stared at me intently. Natalie, have you been in love these years? I secretly pinched the palm of my hand, put the durian flesh in a small bowl, and fed it to his mouth. No. After a pause, I spoke again. Really, Zebulon, believe me. Zebulon held the durian flesh in his mouth, smiled gently, and nodded. A small 2-room apartment was just enough for Zebulon and me. He was a little worried about the strange looks of others, so he was reluctant to go out. We just stayed at home, watched TV series, raised flowers, and did rehabilitation. I also cooked him various nutritious meals according to the recipes. I used Zebulon's ID card to apply for a new card, so no one could contact me. But one day when I was swiping my phone, I saw Baldwin's name for the first time in a long time. On the skyscrapers of City A, a line of words flashed frequently. Natalie, if you don't show up, I'll kill myself. Baldwin wouldn't really die, but I knew he was threatening me nakedly. 10 years ago, when I broke up with Baldwin, I hid from him very carefully. He couldn't find me, so he made a scene at home, saying that he wouldn't live without me. He was the only son of the family, and he had been spoiled since he was a child. So naturally, he got whatever he wanted. After Baldwin's family took action, I lost my job and my house. When I had nowhere to go with my luggage, Baldwin appeared, crying that he couldn't live without me, and saying that no matter where I escaped to, he could find me. I was afraid that Baldwin would appear in front of Zebulon, so I decided to find him. Zebulon knew I was going out. He didn't speak, he just looked at me, but he made me feel guilty, and I ran away. 5. I found Baldwin without any effort. Apart from some dark circles under his eyes, he still looked superior. Seeing me, he immediately kicked Odessa aside and carried me over his shoulder into the next room. Baldwin threw me on the bed and pressed down on me. "Baldwin, we're divorced. This is inappropriate." Baldwin kissed me and mumbled indistinctly, "If you want a reunion, we can have one. If you don't want a reunion, it's up to you. I'll listen to you. I want to leave." "Okay, let's go home. I don't want to be with you anymore." The movement of Baldwin's hand finally stopped. He frowned slightly and looked at me. "Are you serious?" I nodded. Halfway through nodding, Baldwin slapped me. "Natalie, I'm giving you face, aren't I? I've raised you for so many years, and besides occasionally loving other women, haven't I been wholeheartedly devoted to you?" What Baldwin said was true. When I married Baldwin, he begged his family to do so. Baldwin's family couldn't do anything about him, so they had us sign a prenuptial agreement. Once divorced, I would leave with nothing, and during the marriage, I could not have any property in my name, not even a car. Baldwin knew I loved money, so after marriage, he gave me an unlimited credit card and told me to buy whatever I wanted, and after buying it, I could sell it for money, which would be mine. Therefore, I could afford Zebulon's expensive medical expenses, and I saved money that I couldn't earn in 10 lifetimes. But I really don't like you anymore. Baldwin saw my seriousness, grabbed my neck, and his face turned frighteningly black. "Natalie, think clearly. No other man dares to want a woman that I don't want." He let go, ignoring my violent cough on the bed, and turned to leave the box. I turned around and rushed home. I wanted to tell Zebulon that I was going to take him away, but as soon as I opened my mouth, the door behind me was kicked open. 6. It was Baldwin who kicked open the door. I subconsciously blocked Zebulon behind me. Baldwin's eyes were red with anger. "Natalie, you actually hit someone behind my back." I turned to Zebulon, my eyes pleading, "Can you go back to the room?" Zebulon looked at me and blinked. The whole time, he didn't look at Baldwin once. Seeing that he was about to leave, Baldwin reached out to grab him, but I stopped him. "Please, let's talk outside." Baldwin panted and went out with me. "Natalie, are you blind? A man who only knows how to hide behind a woman when something happens. You like him too?" I looked at Baldwin and mustered up my courage. He's my first love. When I was in high school, a group of hooligans bullied me. He was injured and became a vegetable to protect me. I dropped out of school to work to pay for his medical expenses. Baldwin opened and closed his mouth several times, looking completely incredulous. "Doesn't he have a family? Does he need you to earn money for him? Do you think I'm a fool?" His father died early, and his mother committed suicide half a year after his accident. When I was a child, my father loved to drink and beat people, and my mother couldn't stand it, so she secretly left, and then I became the one who was beaten. If it weren't for him and his mother who took care of me since I was young, I would have died long ago. Baldwin, he has been a vegetable for 10 years for me, and I can't repay him even if I spend the rest of my life. Can you please fulfill me? I tried desperately to suppress the urge to cry, and I choked back my great pain. I don't know if doing this will make Baldwin let me and Zebulon go. I'm gambling on Baldwin's arrogance, gambling on his disdain, and gambling that he doesn't have much affection for me, but just thinks I'm clean and controllable. After all, when he decided to be with me, it was because he found a spot of red on the bed after one night. I saw shock and delight in his eyes. So since then, I have deliberately kept my distance from all men. But Baldwin's next word stunned me. 7. So, have you ever loved me in these 10 years? My silence was taken as a tacit agreement by him. He held me in his arms. Come with me now. I can pretend that nothing has happened. I will pay for all his subsequent treatment expenses, and I will also cover all the expenses for the rest of his life. My heart was beating so hard that I told Baldwin in a voice that I couldn't even hear myself. Give me some time to think about it. Worried that Baldwin wouldn't believe me, I took the initiative to kiss him, and I was relieved when I saw him leave completely. I looked at the tightly closed door that had never been opened, leaned against the wall, and thought for a long time, thinking about where Zebulon and I could go, thinking about how to explain the relationship between Baldwin and me, and thinking about how I could explain that he would agree to let me leave without waiting for my aunt. I didn't return to the room until my legs were numb from squatting, and it was completely dark. Zebulon sat by the window, looking at the stars in the sky, and no one knew what he was thinking. I sat next to him. Zebulon, let's go on a trip. Once we leave, we won't come back. Zebulon's mouth curved slightly. Okay. We didn't talk about what Baldwin and I just talked about, but just discussed where to go first, where to go next, and whether to take a plane or a train. Zebulon said he had never taken a ride before, and he wanted to try them all. We talked until midnight, ordered takeout and ate, and then I fell asleep. In a daze, I seemed to hear Zebulon talking. Natalie, I miss my mom. Can we wait until she comes back before leaving? 8. I was woken up by the noise outside in the morning. As usual, I went to Zebulon's room to check on him, but he wasn't there. With a huge sense of unease, I looked out of the window. Just 10 meters away from me, Zebulon's bleeding body was lying on the ground. I stumbled downstairs and looked at him covered by a white sheet by the medical staff, and I felt like the whole world had gone quiet. I only knew I was crying loudly, asking loudly what happened, looking at the person in front of me opening and closing their mouth, but couldn't hear what they were saying at all. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. There were police and nurses, saying that Zebulon had ended his life by jumping from a high place and died on the spot. It was reported by a neighbor in the community and called an ambulance. The surveillance also confirmed that he climbed up to the rooftop himself. The police were puzzled as to why there were surveillance cameras on the rooftop of an old apartment building. The young people in the community said that 10 years ago, someone died, and her family argued with the property management, saying that there was a safety hazard on the rooftop that caused the deceased to accidentally fall. Later, the police inspected the scene and confirmed through the examination of the deceased's footprints that the deceased went directly to the rooftop with a clear purpose and jumped down without any hesitation. Later, the property installed surveillance cameras to avoid such incidents from happening again. I heard that the person who committed suicide 10 years ago also lived in the building where you live now. What is the relationship between you? I trembled all over and couldn't say a word. It couldn't be a coincidence that Zebulon chose to jump from the place where his mother ended her life. In fact, arguing with the property management was also a helpless thing back then. On the one hand, I didn't believe that Aunt Paige would be willing to leave Zebulon, and on the other hand, because Aunt Paige died, there was no more money to pay for Zebulon's medical treatment. I found the property management in a daze and asked them for compensation. The property management saw that I was just a little girl, and they were both helpless and annoyed, and kept telling me that it was useless to find them. How could I not know it was useless to find them? But who else could I turn to? I rushed back to the house and searched every corner of Zebulon's room, but I couldn't find a single word he left for me. He woke up so suddenly, and then left completely without warning. I looked around this house that I had exchanged for freedom and my body, and suddenly felt that my initial choice was wrong. 9. When Zebulon had his accident, his mother wanted to sell this house right away, but I stopped her desperately. She didn't know that this small house held a little secret of Zebulon's. When Zebulon was 8 months old, Zebulon's father died because of a wrong injection given by a quack doctor. The doctor was a relative of the village chief, and Zebulon's grandmother and family didn't dare to make trouble, so they instigated Zebulon's mother to make a fuss. The money was recovered, and Zebulon and his mother were kicked out of the house by their grandmother. The reason was, "You have offended the village chief. If we don't drive you out, how can our family still stand in this village?" Aunt Paige moved into this old and dilapidated house with Zebulon. As time went on, the house became clean and warm. Aunt Paige often muttered that it would be nice if she could buy this house someday. So 12-year-old Zebulon worked part-time on his way to and from school. My dad drank every day at that time, and he didn't go home every few days. So I followed him around too. We picked up bottles, ran errands and delivered things for others, and even secretly served food in restaurants. We didn't stop until high school when the courses became more and more intensive. We gave the 10,000 yuan we had saved to Aunt Paige. Zebulon lied to his mother and said it was from his grandmother. I am now the one with the best academic performance and the most promising future in the family. Grandma said that I should be filial to her when I earn money in the future. Zebulon's mother took the money and cried uncontrollably. After all, when they were kicked out, they were not even allowed to take a quilt. Aunt Paige said angrily, "Why should my son, whom I raised with so much hard work, be filial to her in the future?" Zebulon smiled. "Whether we are filial to her or not, it's still up to us." Later, Zebulon's mother used all the money to buy this old and dilapidated house. But just a year later, Zebulon had an accident. I clearly remember the look on Zebulon's face when he gave the money to Aunt Paige that year. Proud, and full of hope for the future. Aunt Paige cried and asked me how to save Zebulon without selling the house. And the money in her hand couldn't save Zebulon at all. So I dropped out of school. Through my friends, I went to work as a waitress in a nightclub. That's when I met Baldwin. He looked me up and down with a smile. "At such a young age, you're so vain. What are you going to do with the money you earn? Get a breast augmentation." A group of people laughed loudly. I had never seen such a scene at that time. My face turned red all of a sudden. I tremblingly put the things they wanted on the table and turned and left. Baldwin went there often, and every time he went, he would ask me how much more money I needed for the breast augmentation, and if I needed some financial support. I pinched the palm of my hand and asked him if I could borrow 5,000 yuan. Baldwin pushed open the door of the box with a big laugh. I won. It turned out that as early as our first meeting, they had made a bet to see how long I could endure before I started asking him for money. Some bet a week, some bet a month, some bet 2 months. Only Baldwin guessed right. He said 3 months. That day, Baldwin won tens of thousands of dollars, and he happily gave me 10,000 yuan. When I excitedly arrived at the hospital, I heard the bad news that Aunt Paige had committed suicide. It turned out that what she said to me that morning was a farewell. "Natalie, I gave the hospital another 2,000 yuan today. It's great. Zebulon can live a few more days." "Natalie, I really hope Zebulon can wake up and call me mom again." After taking care of Aunt Paige's funeral, I hid in Aunt Paige's house for several days, feeling lost about the future. I wanted to die, but I couldn't bear to leave this world. I wanted Zebulon to die, but he could turn over, he could breathe. It was as if he could wake up at any time and smile at me, and I couldn't bear it either. So I had to make money to support him. A week later, when I returned to the nightclub, Baldwin was still there. "I thought you could really be satisfied with that 10,000 yuan. He glanced at my chest again. "Didn't you get the surgery? So what did you use it for?" I lowered my head and tried to avoid his gaze. "That money, I will pay you back." Baldwin lowered his voice. When will you be an adult?" 10. After Zebulon left, I would have dreams every night, dreaming of the scene when we saw each other again when he woke up. 13 years later, when our eyes met again, we both shed tears at the same time. His consciousness was blurred, and his physical functions had deteriorated severely, but he still recognized me at a glance. He didn't speak, but I understood his eyes. He said, "Natalie, don't cry." The doctor said that Zebulon could wake up, firstly because of the advanced treatment equipment, secondly because of the high-end care, but most importantly, the patient himself had a strong desire to survive. Of course I understand this. If it weren't for that accident that year, Zebulon could have successfully entered the university he admired, then found a job he liked, and could support his mother who had raised him alone, and could marry me, his childhood sweetheart. But the beautiful dreams of youth were ended in that dark alley by a few hooligans. When he was holding tightly onto the feet of those hooligans, he still didn't forget to look at me with bloodshot eyes. Natalie, run. I stayed in the ward with Zebulon for many days, chattering to him about how society had changed. Zebulon wasn't very interested. His eyes, which were a little cloudy from sleeping for too long, kept looking at me, and he mouthed to me, "Natalie, you're still so beautiful. Natalie, where's my mom? Natalie, I miss my mom." But how could I tell him that in the 6th month of his coma, my aunt couldn't bear the blow and committed suicide in the middle of the night due to depression? I held his thin hand and told him word by word, "Aunt went to Tibet on foot to pray for you. And now that you are awake, she is very happy. So she decided to walk back to repay the grace of heaven." It would take at least 2 months to walk back from Tibet, and I could hide it for as long as possible. It was also finally time to tell Baldwin that I was leaving. During that time, Baldwin had hooked up with a new girl, so I created many opportunities for them so that I could catch them in bed. The little girl was very eager to climb up, unlike what I expected, but I didn't expect that she also contributed a straw to the straw that broke Zebulon's back. The day I took Zebulon home, I met her in the hospital. She told me proudly that Baldwin had hurt her too hard the night before. "I've heard for a long time that you hooked up with Mr. Baldwin by improper means. Now you've been Mrs. Baldwin for 10 years and have made a lot of money. Don't bother Mr. Baldwin anymore. Give me a chance too." I nodded perfunctorily. "We've already divorced. I hope you work hard after all. I have my own life too, and I don't want to be disturbed by him." At that time, I just wanted her to cling to Baldwin, and it would be best if she could directly take down Baldwin, so that Zebulon and I would be safe. But she thought I was mocking her, and followed me unwillingly. She saw Zebulon, and even took the opportunity to tell Zebulon that I was a gold digger, a woman who would follow anyone who gave her money. So when Zebulon came home, he asked me if I was in love, and he was giving me a chance to tell him the truth. Maybe at the moment I denied it, his life had already entered the countdown. But everything has a trigger point. 11. At Zebulon's funeral, Baldwin showed up with a professional funeral team. He pulled me aside. I quietly watched these people handle Zebulon's funeral in a procedural manner. Solemn but cold, Baldwin suddenly spoke. "Natalie." I cut him off, because no matter what he said, I didn't want to hear it. "What did you say to him?" Ignoring Baldwin's hand gradually tightening on my shoulder, I looked up at him. He clearly promised me that we would go on a trip together. He couldn't have suddenly committed suicide. "What did you say to him?" Baldwin's face turned dark and gloomy. "He's a cripple. Does he have the qualifications to compete with me? Do I need to go and tell him anything?" "Natalie, we've been together for 12 years. Do you think I would do something like this?" He lowered his voice. "If you don't believe me, I can help you check it out. The premise is we get back together first. Give me some time to think about it." Baldwin let go of my hand, and I turned and walked outside. When I reached a quiet place, Odessa appeared behind me. "What do you want to say?" While I was talking to Baldwin inside, Odessa had been standing at the door, wanting to come in but not daring to. Odessa clutched the hem of her clothes tightly. "Don't get back together with Baldwin. Zebulon was killed by him." I stared at her intently. "What do you know?" Odessa glanced around nervously, took out her phone and showed me the video she recorded. A small drone with a letter attached to it stopped in front of the window where Zebulon was. There was a bell hanging below, and the sound attracted Zebulon to open the window. He stood by the window, opened the envelope, and took out the photo and letter inside. The video was only 10 seconds long. I looked at Odessa, my voice trembling. "When did this happen? What was in the envelope?" Odessa looked around cautiously and mustered up her courage. Inside was a report of Zebulon's mother's suicide, as well as news of your marriage to Mr. Baldwin and loving photos of you two over the years. It was just when Mr. Baldwin came to your door. We just wanted to force Zebulon to leave you. We didn't expect him to commit suicide." I laughed so hard I cried. Didn't expect him to commit suicide. When a comatose vegetable woke up after 10 years and was seriously out of touch with this society, he discovered that his mother had committed suicide very early because of him, and the girl he loved had married someone else long ago. How strong must his mind be to choose to leave quietly and live a silent life alone? Why are you telling me? Aren't you afraid that Baldwin will kill you? I just don't want you to get back together with him. I love Mr. Baldwin. I want to be with him, even if he doesn't want to marry me. Seeing that I didn't speak, but just stared at her, she was a little nervous. You wouldn't really be with him after he killed your first love, would you? If you really get back together, you're not worthy of Zebulon? I laughed. Have you ever thought about why Baldwin made you control that drone? Odessa looked at me in confusion, and the next second, she was kicked away by someone. The one who kicked her was Baldwin, trying to stir up trouble between me and my wife, Odessa. Don't you want to live anymore? Wife, don't believe what she said. She's just trying to drive a wedge between us. I took a step back. You deal with your own affairs, I'll go first. Baldwin said in a deep voice. Wait for me. Accompanied by Odessa's screams coming from behind, I walked in the opposite direction. The final destination was the airport. Baldwin should never have imagined that I would choose to leave halfway through Zebulon's funeral and then completely leave him. 12. Baldwin's beating of Odessa was live-streamed. At first, netizens thought this was just a low-level gimmick to attract attention, but as they watched, they realized something was wrong. So halfway through the beating, Baldwin was caught red-handed by the police. When he was pressed to the ground, netizens discovered that the assailant was actually the young master of the Baldwin family. With the young master's assault being confirmed, the Baldwin family had no room to maneuver for a while. But Odessa was lucky, she didn't die, and the Baldwin family sought reconciliation with her, and she readily agreed. She didn't want money, she just wanted Baldwin to promise her one thing. As a result, Baldwin was soon released, and on the same day, they announced their relationship. One was smiling brightly, the other was gloomy and cold. When I saw this news on the other side of the ocean, I couldn't laugh. I knew that with my limited ability, I couldn't touch Baldwin at all. But being able to stuff a woman he didn't like into his life, maybe I could torture him for a while. And hopefully, every time he sees Odessa, he can think of the most embarrassing stain in his life and want to beat her up again. So, I paid domestic media to occasionally bring this matter up and stir it up. Even if people forget about it over time, there will always be someone who can remind them. That's it. I hope that in this life, neither of you can have a peaceful time.